All right, excited to be back with you again, Thomas Kissinger. This is going to be Lessons from History, Part 8, reading from the book of George Sarris, Heaven's Doors. And we've been going through the early church fathers and what they believed, and that the predominant view of the day was one of an ultimate universal salvation of all mankind through the Lord Jesus Christ. So, if that was the case, which it was, the big question is, what on earth happened? So let's get on into this here, reading from George's book. What on earth happened? If belief in ultimate restoration was prominent in the early centuries of the Christian church, why did it go out of favor to the point of being considered heresy in the Middle Ages? If belief in endless punishment was not the prevailing view in the early church, why did it rise to such a dominant position in later centuries? Good questions. Karl Marx said, "Religion is the opiate of the people." Jesus said, "The truth shall set you free." Religion enslaves, truth liberates. Political and ecclesiastical rulers throughout history have generally understood just how true these concepts are and have acted accordingly. The great transition from the vibrant Christianity of the first few centuries after Christ to the harsh, monolithic structure of the Middle Ages began with the conversion of the Roman Emperor Constantine. In AD 313, he issued the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity in the empire and ended the persecution of Christians. He supported the church financially, built large churches, exempted the clergy from paying taxes, promoted Christians to high office, and returned confiscated property taken during the persecutions under the Emperor Diocletian. Because of his support, Christianity quickly became the dominant and semi-official religion of Rome. As Christianity grew in influence, the spiritually powerful early church quickly became the materially powerful imperial church. Christian leaders were increasingly tempted to please the state and guard their positions rather than seek the truth. Rome grew in power and influence over the former centers of Christianity in Alexandria, Palestine, and the eastern cities. And the Bible increasingly came to be read in its Latin translations rather than in the original Greek and Hebrew. The Bishop of Rome took on the title Pontifex Maximus, originally used by the Roman emperors in their role as high priest of the Roman pantheon, and claimed supremacy over the other bishops. What the church gained in material power, however, it lost in moral force and independence. Once favors began to be granted, church discipline and commitment began to decline as those with mixed motives attained positions of leadership. The greatest casualty of this increased influence of the state in the affairs of the church was the end of freedom of thought and freedom of inquiry. The use of force to punish heretics quickly became the rule. A heretic was one who didn't hold the orthodox view, and the orthodox view became whatever those currently in power determined it to be. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Examples of this have been seen countless times throughout history in monarchies and dictatorships where despots punished enemies to gain and retain power. However, the power to punish only on earth has its limitations. But how about adding the concept of never-ending punishment in the afterlife? That is real power, and an irresistible temptation for many who desired supreme control over all others. The grasp for power accelerated under Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century, fueled in part by the writings of one of the most influential of the Latin fathers. St. Augustine. The most brilliant and influential theologian after Origen was Aurelius Augustinus, known to us as St. Augustine. He was born in what is now Algeria in AD 354 and died in 430. He converted to Christianity at the age of 33. He's one of the most important and influential figures in the development of Western Christianity as well as the history of Western thought. The list of his works consists of more than 100 separate titles. It was Augustine who said, "Thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till they rest in thee." Augustine lived as a pagan intellectual during his early years and followed the Manichaean religion. According to the beliefs of the Manichaeans, there exists a dualism in the universe with good and evil eternally at war with each other. After his conversion to Christ, some of that thinking may have influenced his view of ultimate destinies. Learning a foreign language is not easy, especially if you don't like your teacher. That's not only true today, it was also true in the past, and it was true for Augustine. The classical schooling he received in colonial North Africa was conducted principally in Latin. As a boy, he rebelled against learning Greek because he didn't like the Greek literature he was forced to study, and his teachers beat their students. He commented in his Confessions, "But why did I so much hate the Greek, which I studied as a boy? I do not yet fully know. For not one word of it did I understand, and to make me understand I was urged vehemently with cruel threats and punishments." The result was that Augustine couldn't read the New Testament in its original language. That put him at a clear disadvantage in understanding some of the finer points of the Greek text, as compared with the earlier Greek fathers who read the New Testament in their native tongue. Unlike Clement, Origen, Gregory of Nyssa, Diodorus, Theodore of Mopsuestia, and others who understood the Greek term defining the duration of punishment as meaning an intermediate period of time, Augustine assumed and insisted that it meant never ending. We'll look carefully at this meaning of this term aion in chapter 10. In contrast to those who saw God's sovereign power and divine love working together even after death to accomplish the salvation of all, Augustine believed that most would never be saved. Here's a quote, "But many more are left under punishment than are delivered from it, in order that it may thus be shown what was due to all." When presented with the dilemma of whether God would save all but couldn't, which would place a limit on his power, or that he could save all but wouldn't, which would place a limit on his love, Augustine chose the latter. He was convinced that God is sovereign and could save all, but in fact, he will only save some. In response to the accusation that this would mean that God is not loving, Augustine explained that all deserve to suffer endlessly. God's decision to save some who clearly don't deserve salvation is evidence that he is not uncaring. In Augustine's view, God does not have a kind purpose in punishing because God has so structured the next world that death will never be abolished. So we'll stop there for now, and that gives you a little background and history on what happened. How that the predominant view for almost the first 400 to 500 years was the ultimate restoration of all things through Jesus Christ. And then comes Augustine, who was very influential, very powerful, but he did not know the Greek language. And the scriptures were originally written in Greek, and he was at a great disadvantage, and he was leaning on Latin translations. And when it came to the Greek word aion and aionios, that mean an age or of the ages or belonging to the ages of time, and these words are used in conjunction with punishment, Augustine thought it meant never ending or forever and ever. But it clearly doesn't mean that. There are entire works written on this one Greek word, aion and aionios, written by scholars, and you can take hours and hours to study this. But when it's used in conjunction with punishment in the Bible, it means the punishment of the age to come, or the punishment of the ages. But it doesn't mean God's going to eternally punish people and torture them forever and ever. That's not our God. That's not our Father. That's the greatest lie ever told about the greatest story ever told. So, hope you enjoyed it. We'll stop there for now, and we'll pick up next time where we left off.